The Triple Crown officially marches on to the second jewel, the Preakness Stakes, without its Kentucky Derby winner, Sovereignty. In a controversial decision, they will not be participating in this year's Kentucky Derby. However, I am okay with this. While I would have liked to see Sovereignty run in the Preakness Stakes, if we are going to say that we do best by the horse, then we will be willing to, if we don't think the horse is good enough, not run them in the Triple Crown. And that's what Bill Mott thought, and no person knows this horse better than the trainer. Now, if I wanted a perfect solution to this sort of crisis that the Triple Crown may be facing, it would be breed sounder horses that can actually withstand it. But instead, we're going to have to deal with horses that currently may or may not be as fit to take on the Triple Crown as their forefathers. So while that's disappointing, we still have a decent field for this year, including the Derby runner-up. So let's get started with one of the most inexperienced, but one of the most talked about horses in the Preakness, Goal Oriented, who won on Derby Day and is coming back off a 2-week layoff to run in their very first Grade 1 race. Now interestingly, they broke their maiden coming from last to first over one turn, and then were more of a stalker/front runner in their victory at Churchill Downs, showing quite a bit of talent. But at the end of the day, they've only ran 2 times, have never ran in stakes company, and have a lot more that they're going to have to deal with. In recent history at least, the least amount of starts a Preakness winner has ran in before they ran the Derby was 3. Goal Oriented has ran 2 and has never ran in a stakes race. He's talented, but I just think this is too much too soon. Number 2, Journalism, the obvious favorite, and the obvious question is, can he rally back in 2 weeks and then win the Preakness Stakes? I think this will be a major question of his. Can he do what many horses in the past have done successfully, wheel back in 2 weeks and win the Preakness Stakes? If he's as good as he may imply, then I think he absolutely should. I think a lot of people are forgetting that even in very recent history, horses that wheeled back in 2 weeks to run in the Preakness were successful. Excluding the COVID Preakness Stakes of 2020, 60% of the top 3 Preakness finishers from the last 10 years were running on 2 weeks rest, including last year, where the top 3 finishers, Seize the Grey, Mystic Dan, and Catching Freedom, all ran on Derby Day. Now, top 3 is a little bit different than winning, but still, in the last 10 years, American Pharoah, Exaggerator, Justify, War of Will, Seize the Grey. That's still a 50% strike rate for winning alone. Could the short rest do him in? Of course. But if he's as heads and knees and toes ahead of this competition as it looks like on paper, then this really shouldn't be a problem. Make no mistake, Journalism is still a very safe bet. Number 3, American Promise, another horse wheeling back from Derby Day. Now his Kentucky Derby performance wasn't all that impressive, as he finished all the way back in 16th place. Now it's not impossible for horses to come back in the Preakness after an abysmal Derby performance and do well. Louis XIV in 1996 finished in the exact same placing and made it work. And Dwayne Lucas is certainly no stranger. Oxbow lost the Kentucky Derby and then redeemed himself in the Preakness, and Seize the Grey took the Pat Day Mile on the Derby undercard to then win the Preakness Stakes just last year. However, this is going to be a very important race for American Promise. You can write an excuse for him losing the Kentucky Derby so poorly with the slightly unfair trip that he had, especially getting squeezed out towards the far turn. But if he flounders in the Preakness, then it's going to prove that at the very least, the Virginia Derby performance that he showed was more of an exception to the rule than what he's fully capable of on a regular occasion. But if he can run back to that Virginia Derby performance, implement that somehow, he still has a chance to do something great. But this experienced leggy horse is certainly going to have a bit of pressure on him to prove that that Derby was a fluke, and what he's really capable of is something greater. Personally, I'm going to avoid him from my picks, but if he does redeem himself in this race, I'm not going to be mad. Number 4, Heart of Honor. Hailing from Great Britain but based in Dubai, this is a very unique participant in the Preakness Stakes. The last time a British horse won the Preakness was over 100 years ago, in 1918, when Warcloud took it. Warcloud is also the first horse in history to participate in all 3 jewels of the Triple Crown, although he only won the Preakness Stakes, but was favored in all 3. Now back to Heart of Honor, the big historical successor. Potentially. Heart of Honor has a lot to prove. First off, his main racing operation is in Dubai. It hardly rains in Dubai. The Preakness, more likely than not, is gonna come up muddy. Heart of Honor will have limited experience on this new surface, while he's training on it, but that's hardly the same as running on it in a full-blown race. Also, the quality of competitors in those races is considered suspect. He most recently lost by a nose in the UAE Derby to Admire Daytona, who finished last in the Kentucky Derby. Now, there's a lot of reasons why Admire Daytona may have ran so poorly, but it doesn't exactly make things look good for Heart of Honor. But for bright sides, his last two races have been at 1 mile and 3/16, and he was ahead and a nose away from winning 2 in a row. In the Albesta Kia, he flew from way back and just missed, and then in the UAE Derby, he was a bit closer to the pace, but was simply outfought late by Admire Daytona. So he's run well at the distance, but has yet to win either. Another thing to also consider is that Maidan's stretch is incredibly long, being over 400 meters. That's over a quarter of a mile, so for him to just miss with that long of a stretch is something to worry about, especially when the Preakness' home stretch is 50 meters shorter at about 355 meters. That's not Gulfstream Park short, but it's shorter than what Heart of Honor has been running on almost his entire racing career. Despite this, I can't help but root for him as he is a unique kind of contender. You don't see horses like Heart of Honor run the Preakness very often, and they do say that if he does run well in this race, they're going to go to the Belmont Stakes, and I'd really love to see that happen. So I'm going to be very much rooting for him and considering him my long shot pick, even though there are a lot of major problems with him. Bet at your own risk. Number 5, Pay Billy. A really nice horse. He's ran 8 times, and he's won half of them, including 4 of his last 5 races, so he's really come into his own, and is steadily improving. The big thing to worry about him, though, is the quality of competition that he has been facing in listed stakes company in Maryland, and also history. Both the Private Terms and the Federico Tessio stakes have very rarely produced successful Preakness participants. Despite the Federico Tessio having the unofficial position as the Preakness trial, it has only produced 1 winner, debuted Testimony back in 1983, with a couple top 3 performances since. While he is consistent, there have been other similar horses that proved successful at the regional level in Maryland that just weren't able to stack it against outside contenders, which is what Pay Billy is going to have to deal with. He's no longer against the small fish in his pond in the local contingent of the Maryland circuit. He will now have to deal with multiple graded stakes winners and 2 Grade 1 winners who just finished performing in the Kentucky Derby. Number 6, River Thames. Now, I had previously mentioned that horses who do very well in the Preakness include those that come off the 2-week break. But there's also one other stereotypical Preakness winner that's almost just as successful. The better-rested, failed Derby contender. Now, River Thames technically didn't fail. They just decided to skip the Kentucky Derby and aim for the Preakness. This has been a successful strategy in previous years, such as in 2017 with Cloud Computing, 2021 with Rombauer, and most recently 2023 with National Treasure. All 3 were considered semi-major Kentucky Derby contenders, but slightly underperformed in their final Derby preps, or for other reasons decided to skip the Kentucky Derby and go straight to the Preakness. They were fresh and they were ready to go, and they proved perfect on Preakness Day. River Thames absolutely belongs amongst this group. So, as far as statistical good probabilities go, along with Journalism and Sandman, right behind them should be River Thames. After all, this horse only lost by a head bob to the Kentucky Derby winner, Sovereignty. That's closer than Journalism got. Now, unfortunately, he might be too popular of smart money and may not be worth his price, but if you do get him for a solid price, absolutely consider him in some way, shape, or form. Let's just hope that he doesn't get too overplayed. Number 7, Sandman. Now, initially, there were definitely some worries about how good the Preakness field was, and there are still going to be some worries about it in future years. But Sandman's later entry definitely added some much needed extra talent to this Preakness field, and I'm really glad to see him here. As far as if he can do this, he's got the perfect trainer for it. Mark Casse trained War of Will. War of Will finished 7th in the 2019 Kentucky Derby, and then won the Preakness Stakes. Sandman finished 7th in the Kentucky Derby, and now could win the Preakness Stakes. So if there's any trainer to do it, it should be Mark Casse. He's seen this before. Some are worried about his new shoes, and some talk of potential tenderness in his feet. However, this is pretty normal for horse racing. Any athlete has to deal with some pains from time to time, and this is so incredibly minor that he is more than capable of running on it. This shouldn't be a huge concern. The big question is, can he rally late and get a piece of the pie? Preakness has historically, in recent years at least, been pretty favorable towards frontrunners, although not always. Rombauer was a come-from-behind horse in 2021, and he made it work. Sandman could too. Mark Casse's previous Preakness winner, War of Will, came off the pace with a rail-skimming victory, which is rather unlike Sandman, but still, he came from behind to win that race. Based off sheer talent, he's easily the second most talented horse in this field behind Journalism. He's just going to have to hope that his late closing kick is even more effective than Journalism's, which the Kentucky Derby proved not quite just yet. But maybe a new race with less horses could be the deciding factor to play into his favor. Maybe also he's shaken off a little bit of that green rust that was a big concern going into the Derby after his victory in the Arkansas Derby. Number 8, Clever Again. This is one of the speedy horses, alongside Goal Oriented, and like Goal Oriented, there are similar problems at foot. Now, Clever Again has one more start under his repertoire than Goal Oriented, but he has one more similar problem, and it's not necessarily his lack of experience. Horses with 3 starts going into the Preakness Stakes have worked before, Cloud Computing being a recent example. It's instead the distance capabilities. Both goal-oriented and Clever Again, the longest distance that they ever ran at is 1 mile and 1/16. That may sound kind of insignificant. Most Preakness horses, the longest race that they've ever ran at, if it's not the Kentucky Derby, is 1 mile and 1/8. That's only a 100-meter difference, right? It's usually more about the class of race that is run at 1 mile and 1/16. There is very rarely top-level 1 mile and 1/16 races. 1 mile and 1/8 is usually the distance for major 3-year-old prep races, so usually it's weaker races that are run at 1 mile and 1/16. And while Clever Again is a listed stakes winner and did defeat a once hotly anticipated Baffert-trained horse, where have you heard that before? He still is incredibly inexperienced and is going to have to use his pure speed in order to outrun everybody, and front-running is a successful strategy in the Preakness Stakes. The bigger thing, though, is that historically, 1 mile and 1/8 was the shortest distance for a Preakness winner before they ran in the Preakness Stakes, in races like the Wither Stakes, the Wood Memorial, etc., etc. No horse has only gone from 1 mile and 1/16 to 1 mile and 3/16 and done it successfully in recent history. So that is a huge concern for Clever Again. And lastly, number 9, the Lexington Stakes winner, Gosger. Now, first off, the Lexington Stakes this year wasn't particularly strong. It had some decent horses in it, but it had very few big graded stakes winners. None of the horses in that race had any shot of running in the Kentucky Derby, which is usually an indicator of high quality. Still, he won a graded stakes race at Keeneland Racecourse. That deserves respect, and Lexington is a good Preakness prep. He'll have a good mid-pack kick. The big question is, can he kick even harder than Journalism or Sandman? He has good attributes, but there are horses in this race that have even greater versions of what he does well. Even Pay Billy, who, while has not beaten as high quality of horses as Gosger, has shown similar attributes with stalking and mid-pack moves. And Pay Billy is not exactly top of the line either, with Journalism, Sandman, and other horses in this field. He's not unplayable, he's just more average in quality compared to some of the other horses in this Preakness field. You can trade him around and play him in a bunch of exotics with other horses in this field, because they're all similarly matched with some exceptions. Now time for my Preakness picks. I'm going to keep it really simple. My favorite pick is going to be Journalism, and my long shot pick is going to be Heart of Honor. If River Thames goes off at a higher price, he definitely could be used, but with his early odds being as low as 9-2, I just don't think it's worth it. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Comment down who you're going to be picking in the Preakness Stakes, and your thoughts on the Triple Crown itself, and if you're also excited for the Bella Toga, also known as the Belmont Stakes. See you guys next time!